The morning sun cast long shadows across the ruins of New Geneva, as Captain Sarah Chen walked through what had once been the most beautiful city on Europa. Glass crunched beneath her boots, and the acrid smell of burnt metal still lingered in the air 3 months after the Kethmori fleet had reduced half the colony to rubble. She paused at what remained of the central plaza, where a twisted sculpture of melted steel marked where the peace monument had stood. "Captain, we're receiving another transmission from the Galactic Council," Lieutenant Rodriguez called from behind her, his voice tight with frustration. Sarah turned to see him jogging across the debris field, tablet in hand. Sarah took the device and read the message. The same diplomatic language, the same empty promises. The Council expressed their deep concern about the attacks on human colonies, and assured them that appropriate measures were being discussed. No timeline, no action, no real help. "Appropriate measures," she muttered, then looked up at Rodriguez. "How many colonies have we lost now?" 17 confirmed destroyed, 12 more heavily damaged. "The Kethmori are moving through human space like we don't exist." Rodriguez kicked at a piece of concrete. "The Council keeps saying we need to be patient, that military intervention might escalate things." Sarah handed back the tablet and stared at the horizon where the local star was setting behind the dome of the barely functioning atmospheric processor. "They're afraid of the Kethmori. The whole galaxy is." The Kethmori hegemony had emerged from the Outer Rim 50 years ago with technology that made most galactic powers look primitive. Their ships moved faster, hit harder, and seemed almost immune to conventional weapons. They had carved through 3 minor civilizations before the Galactic Council had managed to negotiate a truce. The price had been simple. The Kethmori could expand into unprotected space. Humanity, as the newest members of the galactic community, fell squarely into that category. "Ma'am, there's something else," Rodriguez said, pulling up another file on his tablet. "Admiral Harrison sent this through encrypted channels. It's marked for your eyes only." Sarah read the message twice before the full meaning sank in. The Earth Defense Initiative had been activated. After decades of debate and political maneuvering, the human government had finally made a decision that would change everything. "Pack everything essential," she told Rodriguez. "We're going home." The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks aboard the merchant vessel Lucky Strike, one of the few civilian ships still willing to travel through human space. Sarah spent most of the trip in her small cabin, reading classified reports that painted an increasingly grim picture. The Kethmori weren't just attacking randomly. They were systematically targeting human infrastructure, weakening the colonies before moving in for final conquest. But something had changed in the last month. The attacks had slowed and Kethmori fleets had begun withdrawing to defensive positions. Intelligence suggested they were preparing for something bigger, but no one knew what. When the Lucky Strike finally approached Earth, Sarah pressed her face to the viewport and gasped. The planet she had left 5 years ago was barely recognizable. Massive orbital platforms surrounded the world like a metal shell, bristling with weapons and sensor arrays. Ships of every size moved between them in carefully coordinated patterns. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said a voice behind her. Sarah turned to see an older man in admiral's uniform, his chest decorated with ribbons she didn't recognize. "Admiral Harrison," she said, snapping to attention. "At ease, Captain. We're all friends here." Harrison moved to the viewport beside her. "What do you think of our little project?" "It's incredible. How did you build all this so quickly?" Harrison smiled grimly. "We didn't. We've been building this for 30 years, ever since first contact with the galactic community. Every president, every Congress, every military leader has contributed to this moment. We called it the Earth Defense Initiative, but really, it was our insurance policy." Sarah studied the massive structures. Insurance against what? Against the galaxy itself. "You see, Captain, humans have a talent that most alien species find disturbing. We're really, really good at killing things. Our military history scared the hell out of every civilization we met. They welcomed us into the galactic community not because they liked us, but because they were afraid of what we might do if left alone. The shuttle that picked them up from the Lucky Strike was sleek and fast, clearly built with technology Sarah had never seen before. As they descended toward Earth, she could see that the surface had changed too. Massive industrial complexes dotted every continent, their smokestacks reaching toward the sky like fingers. We've been preparing for this war since the day we learned we weren't alone, Harrison continued as they flew over what had once been the Amazon rainforest, now covered with manufacturing facilities. Every human colony that got destroyed, every diplomatic insult we swallowed every time the Council told us to be patient, we were buying time. The shuttle landed at a military base that stretched beyond the horizon. Sarah could see warships under construction, their hulls gleaming in the artificial lights. But these weren't like any ships she'd seen in galactic space. They were angular, aggressive, built purely for war. The Kethamori think they're fighting scattered human colonies defended by converted merchant ships and hand-me-down weapons from our galactic allies, Harrison said as they walked toward a massive command center. They have no idea what's waiting for them here. Inside the command center, hundreds of officers worked at stations displaying tactical information from across human space. At the center of it all was a massive holographic display showing the Sol system and its new defenses. Captain Chen, Harrison said, "I'm promoting you to Commodore and giving you command of the 5th Defense Fleet. Your job is to help us show the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity's sanctuary." Sarah stared at the display, seeing the massive fortress that Earth had become, the fleets of warships hidden in the outer system, the weapon platforms that could level mountains. For the first time since the attacks began, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. "When do we begin?" she asked. Harrison's smile was cold as winter. "The Kethamori are massing for their final assault on human space. Our intelligence suggests they'll move within the week. When they do, they're going to discover that humanity has been keeping a few secrets. The war that would reshape the galaxy was about to begin, and Earth was ready." 3 days after Commodore Chen's arrival on Earth, the Kethamori made their move. The alien fleet materialized at the edge of the Sol system in a display of technological superiority that had terrified dozens of civilizations. 200 massive warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built, dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. In the command center, buried 3 kilometers beneath Geneva, Admiral Harrison watched the sensor displays with cold satisfaction. "Right on schedule," he murmured to Chen, who stood beside him studying the enemy formation. "My God," Chen breathed, looking at the size readings. "Their flagship is 12 kilometers long. Our biggest ships are barely 2. "Size isn't everything," Harrison replied, then activated the command frequency. "All stations, this is command. Execute Operation Sanctuary. Repeat, execute Operation Sanctuary." Across the Sol system, humanity's true strength began to reveal itself. What the Kethamori sensors had registered as asteroids and space debris suddenly came alive with energy signatures. Hidden weapons platforms that had been disguised for decades powered up their main batteries. Stealth ships that had been drifting dark and cold ignited their engines. The most shocking revelation came from the asteroid belt itself. Massive installations built inside hollowed-out rocks began extending docking bays and weapon ports. What appeared to be a mining operation was actually the largest military shipyard in known space. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the Kethamori flagship." "Put it through," Harrison ordered. The holographic display filled with the image of a Kethamori commander, its insectoid features twisted in what might have been amusement. When it spoke, the translation systems rendered its clicking speech into cold, mechanical words. "Humans of the Sol system, I am War Prime Kethvor of the Hegemony First Fleet. Your colonies have been found wanting. Your species has been judged inferior. Surrender now and your deaths will be swift." Harrison stepped forward, his weathered face emotionless. "This is Admiral Harrison of Earth Defense Command. You are trespassing in human space. You have exactly 10 minutes to leave our system before we consider you hostile." The alien's mandibles clicked in what the database identified as laughter. "Your threats amuse us, Admiral. We have studied your capabilities. We know your ships are weak, your weapons primitive. We offer you this chance only because the Galactic Council requests mercy for lesser species." 9 minutes and 30 seconds, Harrison replied calmly. The connection ended, and Chen turned to her superior. "Admiral, they're not wrong about our individual ships. Even with our improvements, we can't match their firepower or armor. "You're thinking like a human from 50 years ago," Harrison said, "before we learned how the galaxy really works. Watch and learn." The Kethmori fleet began its advance, moving in the same formation that had crushed 3 civilizations. Their ships were marvels of alien engineering, smooth organic curves that seemed to flow through space like living creatures. Each one bristled with weapons that could reduce a city to glass. When they reached the orbit of Pluto, the first surprise hit them. The dwarf planet's surface erupted in a chain of explosions that sent chunks of rock spinning into space. But these weren't random detonations. The explosions revealed massive railgun batteries that had been built into the planetary crust itself. Each gun was the size of a city block, and they all fired simultaneously. The hypervelocity projectiles crossed the distance to the alien fleet in seconds. Most of the Kethmori ships managed to intercept or dodge them, but 3 weren't fast enough. The tungsten slugs punched through their organic armor like paper, sending cascades of atmosphere and debris streaming into space. "First blood to us," Chen observed, but her satisfaction was short-lived. The alien fleet's response was immediate and devastating. Energy beams lanced out from their ships, turning the surface of Pluto into molten slag. The railgun batteries were silenced in minutes. "Phase 1 complete," Harrison announced. "Now we see what they're really made of." The Kethmori fleet resumed its advance, more cautiously now but still confident. They had dealt with the humans' first line of defense easily enough. Their sensors showed no major concentrations of human ships ahead. They were completely unprepared for what came next. As the alien fleet passed Neptune's orbit, space itself seemed to come alive around them. What their sensors had dismissed as cosmic radiation suddenly resolved into the heat signatures of thousands of small craft. Human fighters, no larger than shuttles, swarmed out of hiding spots throughout the outer system. But these weren't ordinary fighters. Each one was essentially a guided missile with a pilot, packed with fusion warheads and programmed for kamikaze attacks. The pilots were volunteers, men and women who had lost families in the colony attacks. "For New Geneva," Chen heard one pilot scream over the comm as his fighter slammed into the side of a Kethmori cruiser. The fusion explosion tore a 100-meter hole in the alien ship's hull. The swarm attack lasted for 30 minutes. When it was over, 18 Kethmori ships had been destroyed or crippled, but the cost was terrible. Nearly 3,000 human pilots had died in the assault. "They're learning," Harrison observed grimly as the surviving alien ships adapted their formation to provide better point defense coverage. Time for the next phase. The Kethmori fleet was now passing Jupiter, and their commander was clearly frustrated. These humans were not behaving like the primitive species they had expected. But War Prime Kethvor was confident that his remaining ships could still complete their mission. That confidence evaporated when Jupiter's moons revealed their true nature. Europa, Io, Ganymede, and Callisto had been extensively modified over the past 3 decades. Each moon was now essentially a massive weapons platform, equipped with particle beam arrays that drew power directly from Jupiter's magnetic field. The coordinated bombardment lit up space like a second sun. Particle beams capable of cracking a moon's crust focused on the alien fleet with deadly precision. The Kethmori ship's organic armor, so effective against conventional weapons, began to fail under the sustained assault. "Impossible," Chen heard War Prime Kethvor snarl over an open frequency. "These are the readings of a Class 7 civilization. Humans are barely Class 3. "Classifications are for bureaucrats," Harrison replied, having intercepted the transmission. "Results are for warriors." When the bombardment ended, the Kethmori fleet had been reduced to fewer than 100 ships. But they pressed on, driven by pride and the knowledge that retreat would mean death at the hands of their own superiors. As they approached Mars, the surviving aliens prepared for another hidden defense. What they found instead was something far more terrifying: honesty. The entire human defense fleet was waiting for them in orbit around the red planet. 500 warships in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with weapon ports and armor plating. No tricks, no hidden surprises, just raw military power ready for a stand-up fight. War Prime Kethvor studied the human formation and realized that everything he thought he knew about this species had been wrong. These ships weren't converted merchants or hastily upgraded patrol craft. They were purpose-built warships designed by a species that had been fighting wars before they reached the stars. "So," he transmitted to the human fleet, "you finally show your true strength." Admiral Harrison's response was broadcast across every frequency in the system. No, we're just getting started. The Battle of Mars began at 800 hours ship time, with an exchange of fire that lit up the space between the two fleets like a miniature star going nova. Commodore Chen watched from the bridge of her new flagship, the EDS Retribution, as human, and Keth Mori weapons reached across the void to test each other's defenses. The first salvo revealed the fundamental difference between the two civilizations' approaches to warfare. The Keth Mori relied on massive energy weapons that could punch through any known armor with a single hit. Their ships were individually superior to anything humanity had built, with organic hulls that could adapt and heal damage in real time. But humans had learned different lessons from their violent history. All ships execute pattern Delta 7, Chen commanded, and the human fleet scattered like a school of fish before a predator. Instead of meeting the aliens head-on in a traditional battle line, the human ships broke into small squadrons that attacked from multiple angles simultaneously. The Keth Mori formation, designed for maximum firepower concentration, found itself under assault from dozens of directions at once. Their superior weapons couldn't target all the human ships quickly enough, and their adaptive armor was overwhelmed by the sheer volume of incoming fire. Their tactical computers can't process this many simultaneous threats, reported Lieutenant Commander Park from the sensor station. They're programmed for fighting civilizations that use predictable battle formations. Chen smiled grimly. Humans had given up predictable tactics sometime around the invention of gunpowder. All squadrons implement the Wolves protocol. The human ships began hunting in packs, surrounding individual Keth Mori vessels and tearing them apart with coordinated strikes. It was a brutal, chaotic form of warfare that went against every principle of civilized galactic combat. It was also devastatingly effective. War Prime Keth Vor watched in growing alarm as his fleet was carved apart by the swarming human ships. These weren't the tactics of a primitive species learning to fight among the stars. This was the refined savagery of a race that had been perfecting the art of killing for millennia. Implement Formation Zeta, he commanded. Close ranks and focus fire on their largest ships. But the humans had anticipated this response. As the Keth Mori ships pulled together into a defensive sphere, the human fleet revealed another surprise. Hidden among their warships were vessels that looked like ordinary supply ships, but which suddenly began launching clouds of small objects into space. Missile swarm incoming, the Keth Mori sensor operator reported. Estimate 30,000 individual projectiles. But they weren't missiles. They were mines. Smart mines that could track targets and adjust their courses. Thousands of them slipped through the Keth Mori point defenses and attached themselves to alien hulls before detonating simultaneously. The coordinated explosion turned a dozen Keth Mori ships into expanding clouds of debris and vented atmosphere. The survivors found themselves blinded by electromagnetic interference and unable to coordinate their defense. That was when the human fleet closed in for the kill. Chen watched the tactical display as her ships moved in perfect coordination, their crews trained for exactly this kind of close-quarters battle. The Keth Mori ships, designed for long-range engagements between civilized fleets, were helpless against the human approach. "Ma'am," Park reported, "the alien flagship is trying to break away from the main engagement." Chen studied the display and saw that War Prime Keth Vor was attempting to retreat toward the outer system with his remaining ships. She couldn't allow that to happen. If even one alien ship escaped to report on human capabilities, the next attack would be much harder to repel. "Squadron leaders, this is Retribution. The enemy commander is attempting to flee. All ships, pursue and destroy. No survivors." The chase lasted 3 hours as the surviving Keth Mori ships tried desperately to reach the system's edge in safety. But human ships built for endurance rather than raw power gradually closed the distance. One by one, the alien vessels were run down and destroyed. War Prime Keth Vor's flagship was the last to fall. Surrounded by a dozen human warships, the Yao, massive alien vessel finally slowed to a stop, its weapons silent and its hull venting atmosphere from 100 wounds. "This is Admiral Harrison," came the voice over the communication system. "War Prime Keth Vor, do you surrender?" The alien commander's response was filled with what the translation systems identified as bitter amusement. You think this changes anything, human? The hegemony has 1,000 fleets. When we fail to report, they will send 10 times this number. Let them come, Harrison replied calmly. We'll be ready. The flagship died in a ball of fire as its fusion reactors overloaded, taking the last of the invasion force with it. In the aftermath of the battle, Chen found herself staring at the tactical summary in disbelief. In less than 6 hours, humanity had completely destroyed a Keth Mori fleet that had conquered 3 civilizations. The cost had been significant. 47 human ships destroyed and over 10,000 casualties. But the strategic victory was absolute. Commodore, Lieutenant Rodriguez said from the communications station, we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. News of the battle is spreading fast. Chen pulled up the intercepts and began reading. The reaction from the galactic community was a mixture of shock, awe, and terror. No one had successfully defeated a Keth Mori fleet in open battle. The political implications were staggering. Ma'am, Rodriguez continued, Admiral Harrison is requesting your presence in the command center. Priority 1. Chen made her way back to Earth, her mind racing with the implications of what they had accomplished. When she arrived at the command center, she found Harrison studying a galaxy-wide tactical display with grim satisfaction. The Galactic Council is in emergency session, he told her without preamble. Half of them want to immediately offer us full military alliance status. The other half are terrified that we're going to turn on them next. Are we? Chen asked. Harrison turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. That depends entirely on how they treat us from now on. For 30 years, we've been the galaxy's unwanted stepchildren. They let the Keth Mori attack our colonies because they thought we were weak and expendable. He gestured to the display, which showed human fleet movements throughout local space. They're about to learn that we're neither weak nor expendable, and if they try to use us as a shield against other threats without giving us the respect we've earned, they're going to discover that humans can be far more dangerous as enemies than we ever were as allies. Chen studied the display and realized that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer a minor player begging for scraps from the galactic table. They were a military power that could reshape the balance of the galaxy. What's our next move? She asked. Harrison smiled, and there was something predatory in his expression. We wait for the Keth Mori to send their next fleet, and when they do, we're going to teach the entire galaxy a lesson about what happens when you threaten Earth. The first battle was over, but the war for humanity's place in the galaxy had only just begun. 2 weeks after the destruction of the first Keth Mori fleet, the galaxy was in chaos. Emergency sessions convened on every major world as civilizations that had cowered before the hegemony for decades suddenly found themselves reconsidering their positions. The impossible had happened. The Keth Mori had been defeated in open battle. In the command center beneath Geneva, Admiral Harrison read through diplomatic dispatches with growing amusement. The Alteran Republic, which had refused to sell humanity, advanced sensors just 6 months ago, was now offering a full military alliance. The Vegan Confederacy had suddenly discovered that their previous trade embargo against human colonies had been a regrettable misunderstanding. Sir, Commodore Chen said, entering the command center with a datapad in hand, we've received formal requests for military assistance from 7 different civilizations. They're all offering substantial compensation. Harrison took the pad and scrolled through the offers. Mining rights, advanced technology, exclusive trade agreements. The galaxy was suddenly very eager to be humanity's friend. Decline them all, he said, handing the pad back. Chen raised an eyebrow. Sir, some of these offers could accelerate our technological development by decades and make us mercenaries, Harrison replied. The Keth Mori aren't going to give up after one defeat. When they come back, they'll bring everything they have. We need to be focused on defending Earth, not scattered across the galaxy protecting people who wouldn't lift a finger to help us a month ago. As if summoned by his words, the communications officer called out from across the room. Admiral, priority transmission from Deep Space Monitoring Station Gamma 7. They're reporting massive hyperspace distortions in the Keth Mori home sectors. Harrison and Chen exchanged grim looks. They had known this moment would come. Put me through to the Galactic Council, Harrison ordered. It's time they heard some uncomfortable truths. The holographic display filled with the images of representatives from dozens of species, their expressions ranging from hopeful to terrified. At the center sat the Council Prime, an elderly Centaurian whose tentacles writhed with barely controlled anxiety. Admiral Harrison, the Prime began, the Council extends its congratulations on your recent victory. We are prepared to discuss full membership for humanity and— Cut the diplomatic nonsense, Harrison interrupted, causing a ripple of shock through the assembled representatives. You know why I'm calling. Our sensors show the Keth Mori are massing for retaliation. This time they won't send a single fleet. They'll bring everything. The Prime's tentacles went still. What do you require from the Council? Harrison smiled coldly. Nothing. We're calling to inform you that human space is now closed to all non-human traffic. Any ship attempting to enter the Sol system without explicit permission will be considered hostile and destroyed without warning. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Representatives began shouting in dozens of languages, their translators struggling to keep up with the cacophony of outrage. You cannot simply declare independence from galactic law, the Vegan representative protested. Watch us, Harrison replied. For 30 years we've played by your rules. We've begged for scraps of outdated technology and accepted your condescending lectures about civilized warfare. In return, you stood by and watched as our colonies burned. He leaned forward, his expression deadly serious. We're done playing by rules written by civilizations too weak to defend themselves. Humanity will handle the Keth Mori threat our way. When we're finished, we'll discuss terms for rejoining galactic society. Terms that reflect our actual contributions to galactic security. The transmission ended, leaving stunned silence in the council chambers across the galaxy. Chen watched her superior with a mixture of admiration and concern. Sir, we just declared ourselves independent from the largest political entity in the known galaxy. Some of those civilizations have fleets of their own. Let them come, Harrison said. Right now they need us more than we need them. And if any of them decide to side with the Keth Mori. He shrugged. Well, we've had practice dealing with alien fleets recently. The next 3 weeks passed in a frenzy of activity as humanity prepared for the coming storm. The asteroid belt shipyards worked around the clock, producing new warships at a rate that would have been impossible without the automated manufacturing. Systems humanity had been secretly developing for decades. Chen found herself promoted again, this time to admiral, and given command of the newly formed Home Defense Fleet. Her ships were different from the vessels that had fought at Mars, larger, more heavily armed, and equipped with experimental weapons that pushed the boundaries of known physics. How many ships are we expecting? She asked Harrison as they reviewed the latest intelligence reports. Our deep space monitors detected at least 2,000 hyperspace signatures, Harrison replied grimly. That's not just a fleet. That's a full invasion armada. The Keth Mori are bringing everything they have. Chen studied the tactical projections. Even with humanity's advantages in strategy and tactics, 2,000 ships represented overwhelming force. The mathematics were brutal and simple. They couldn't win a conventional engagement against those numbers. Sir, she said carefully, perhaps we should reconsider some of those alliance offers. The Centaurian Republic alone could provide 300 ships. Harrison shook his head. Those ships would just be targets. The Keth Mori would tear through them in the first 5 minutes, and then we'd have to protect the survivors while fighting our own battle. He pulled up a different display, one showing the Sol system's defenses in their current configuration. Besides, we're not planning to fight them conventionally. Chen studied the new defensive layout and felt her blood run cold. Sir, this plan, if it fails, it won't just mean the defeat of humanity. It could sterilize the entire inner system. If it fails, humanity is finished anyway, Harrison replied. The Keth Mori don't take prisoners or allow defeated enemies to survive. This is our species' last stand, Admiral. We're going to make it count. The Keth Mori armada arrived exactly when the long-range sensors had predicted. 2,000 ships of the line, accompanied by hundreds of support vessels and troop transports. War Master Zefkai, the hegemony's supreme military commander, had come personally to oversee humanity's extinction. Unlike his subordinate at Mars, HFY was taking no chances. His fleet moved in perfect formation, sensors sweeping constantly for hidden defenses. When they detected the weapon platforms at Pluto's orbit, they simply fired from maximum range, turning the entire region into a field of radioactive debris, without ever coming within range of return fire. "They've learned from our previous engagement," Chen observed from her flagship, now positioned in Earth's orbit alongside the planet's massive defensive platforms. "Good," Harrison replied from the command center. "Arrogance was their weakness before. Now we get to see how they handle real fear." The Kethmori fleet had paused at Jupiter's orbit, clearly expecting another ambush. When none came, they began a methodical advance, staying in tight formation and maintaining overlapping fields of fire. It was textbook military doctrine, safe, predictable, and exactly what Harrison had been counting on. "All ships," Harrison broadcast on the command frequency, "prepare for Operation Final Sanctuary. This is humanity's moment. Make it count." As the alien armada approached Mars, humanity revealed its final secret. Hidden installations throughout the inner system began powering up weapons that had been under development since first contact with galactic civilization. Not incremental improvements to existing technology, but revolutionary breakthroughs that redefined what was possible. The battle for Earth was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. War Master HFY studied the tactical display aboard his flagship and felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 centuries of conquest: genuine uncertainty. The human defenses were unlike anything in his vast experience. Instead of the massive battle stations or mobile fleets he expected, the inner system appeared almost empty except for the single planet that was humanity's home. But his sensors told a different story. Energy readings throughout the system suggested weapons of unprecedented power, hidden among what appeared to be ordinary asteroids and space debris. The humans had turned their entire solar system into a fortress, and he was flying his armada directly into its heart. "War Master," his sensor operator reported, "we're detecting massive energy buildups throughout the asteroid belt. The signatures don't match any known weapon systems." HFY's mandibles clicked with irritation. The First Fleet had underestimated these creatures and paid the ultimate price. He would not make the same mistake. "All ships prepare for immediate bombardment of the asteroid belt. Maximum firepower, full saturation pattern." The Kethmori armada opened fire with weapons that had shattered moons and cracked planets. Energy beams capable of boiling oceans reached across space to sterilize what they assumed were humanity's hidden weapons. They were completely unprepared for what happened. Next, the asteroids they targeted didn't explode or vaporize. Instead, they absorbed the incoming energy and began to glow with an eerie blue light. Thousands of modified asteroids throughout the belt suddenly came alive with power that defied every law of physics the Kethmori understood. "Impossible energy readings," the sensor operator stammered. "Each asteroid is showing output equivalent to a stellar core." Admiral Chen watched from Earth's orbit as humanity's greatest secret revealed itself. For 30 years, human scientists had been secretly developing zero-point energy extraction technology, using principles barely understood by galactic science. Each asteroid in the belt had been converted into a massive zero-point generator, capable of tapping directly into the quantum foam that underlied reality itself. The asteroid belt had become the largest power source in known space. "All stations," Harrison broadcast from his command center, "commence Operation Daybreak." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every asteroid in the belt suddenly discharged its stored energy simultaneously, creating a coherent beam of destruction that reached across the solar system like the finger of an angry god. The beam was focused through a series of gravitational lenses hidden throughout the outer system, concentrating enough energy to ignite stars. The Kethmori armada found itself caught in a cone of annihilation that existed beyond the edge of known science. Ships that had survived the death of civilization simply ceased to exist, their matter converted to energy in a reaction that lit up half the galaxy. When the light faded, 3/4 of the Kethmori fleet was gone. War Master HFY stared at his displays in shock that bordered on madness. In 30 seconds, the humans had done what no civilization in galactic history had ever accomplished. They had made the Kethmori hegemony's military might look primitive. How? He whispered. How is this possible? The answer came in the form of a transmission from Earth. Admiral Harrison's weathered face appeared on Zefkai's command display. His expression calm despite having just unleashed a weapon that could crack worlds. War Master Zefkai, Harrison said, I believe formal introductions are in order. You're looking at the defense grid of a species that has been preparing for this moment since we first learned we weren't alone in the universe. Zefkai found his voice. What manner of weapons are these? No civilization in the galaxy possesses such technology. You're right, Harrison agreed. No galactic civilization does. But humans aren't really a galactic civilization, are we? We're something new. Something that scares the established powers so much they were willing to let you exterminate us, rather than face what we might become. The War Master studied his remaining forces. 500 ships remained operational, still enough to devastate most civilizations, but these humans had demonstrated capabilities that redefined what was possible. You cannot have unlimited power, Zefkai said, grasping for tactical hope. Such energy expenditure must have exhausted your systems. Harrison smiled. Would you like to test that theory? As if summoned by his words, new energy readings began appearing throughout the inner system. The planets themselves were lighting up with power signatures that dwarfed anything the Kethmori had ever detected. Mars, Venus, even Earth's moon revealed massive installations that had been hidden beneath artificial surfaces. Every world in our system has been converted into a weapons platform, Harrison explained conversationally. We've had 3 decades to prepare, War Master. Every asteroid mined, every planet surveyed, every moon explored. All of it in service of this moment. Admiral Chen watched from her flagship as the surviving Kethmori ships began to retreat toward the system's edge. But Harrison wasn't finished demonstrating humanity's capabilities. All planetary installations, he commanded, demonstrate operational readiness. Mars was the first to respond. The planet's surface erupted with launch tubes that sent thousands of missiles into space. But these weren't ordinary projectiles. They were relativistic kill vehicles, accelerated to near light speed by magnetic launchers that ran through the planet's core. Venus followed, revealing particle beam arrays that drew power from the planet's hellish surface conditions. The moon lit up with gravitational weapons that could twist space itself into a weapon. Even Earth contributed to the display, though its weapons remained hidden. The planet's magnetic field itself had been weaponized, capable of generating electromagnetic pulses that could fry electronics across light years. War Master Zefkai watched the demonstration with growing horror. Each planetary weapon system was more powerful than his entire remaining fleet. The humans hadn't just prepared for war, they had turned their home system into the ultimate fortress. This is beyond warfare, he transmitted. This is the power to reshape galaxies. Yes, Harrison agreed. It is. And we built it all because species like yours taught us that the galaxy respects only strength. Well, War Master, you're looking at strength that your hegemony can't comprehend, let alone match. The remaining Kethmori ships had reached the system's edge, but their retreat was being carefully monitored by human sensors. Chen knew that Harrison couldn't allow any of them to escape and report what they had seen. War Master, Harrison continued, you have 2 choices. Surrender your remaining ships and crews, and we'll treat you according to the galactic conventions of war, or attempt to flee and discover what our outer system defenses are capable of. Zefkai's response was immediate and desperate. You're bluffing. No species would build weapons capable of destroying their own system. War Master, Harrison said quietly, you clearly don't understand humans very well. We've been building weapons capable of destroying ourselves since we discovered fire. The only difference now is scale. The Kethmori commander stared at the tactical display showing his fleet's position relative to the system's edge. Every instinct told him to run to get word back to the hegemony about these impossibly advanced humans. But deep in his mind, he understood a terrible truth. These creatures weren't bluffing. They really had turned their entire solar system into a weapon capable of challenging the fundamental structure of galactic civilization, and they were just getting started. War Master Zefkai made his choice. Pride and fear warred within him as he looked at the massive human installations surrounding his battered fleet. But in the end, survival instinct won. The Kethmori had not conquered half the galaxy by throwing away military assets in hopeless gestures. Human Admiral, he transmitted, his voice heavy with defeat. The Hegemony Second Fleet surrenders. We request terms according to Galactic Military Convention. Harrison's response was immediate. Terms accepted. All Kethmori vessels will power down weapons and engines immediately. Any ship that attempts to flee or resist will be destroyed without warning. Admiral Chen watched from her flagship as the surviving alien ships went dark one by one. It was a sight no one in galactic history had ever witnessed. A Kethmori fleet surrendering to an enemy they had expected to easily defeat. "Ma'am," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Word of the surrender is spreading fast." Chen pulled up the intercepts and began reading. The reaction was unprecedented. Civilizations that had lived in terror of the Kethmori for generations were celebrating in the streets. The hegemony's aura of invincibility had been shattered completely. But not everyone was celebrating. The more militarily advanced civilizations were asking harder questions about humanity's demonstrated capabilities. The weapons they had witnessed went beyond mere technological superiority. They represented a fundamental breakthrough in applied physics. "Admiral," Harrison's voice came through the secure channel. "Report to the command center immediately. We have a situation developing." When Chen arrived at the underground facility, she found Harrison studying a galaxy-wide communication display with grim concern. Representatives from every major civilization were demanding answers, and their tone was becoming increasingly hostile. "The Centaurian Republic is asking for immediate inspection of our weapons systems," Harrison told her. "The Vegan Confederacy wants full disclosure of our zero-point energy technology, and the Alteran Republic is demanding that we submit to galactic oversight of our military development." Chen studied the messages. "They're afraid of us." Terrified, Harrison agreed. For 50 years, galactic civilization has operated under the assumption that technological advancement follows predictable patterns. They've all been playing the same game with the same rules. We just proved that humans don't play by anyone's rules but our own. A new communication alert chimed, and the display filled with the image of Council Prime, flanked by representatives from the galaxy's most powerful military forces. The Centaurians' tentacles were rigid with barely controlled fear. "Admiral Harrison," the Prime began, "the Galactic Council demands immediate explanation for the weapons demonstrated in your recent engagement. The energy signatures detected suggest technology that violates several fundamental principles of physics." Harrison leaned back in his chair. "Council Prime, with respect, I don't recall humanity ever agreeing to share our military secrets with civilizations that stood by while our colonies burned. This goes beyond military secrets," the Centaurian replied. "The weapons you've demonstrated could destabilize the galactic balance of power. They could be used to threaten civilizations across known space." "They could," Harrison agreed, "but they won't be. These defenses were built for one purpose, protecting Earth. We have no interest in galactic conquest." The Vegan representative leaned forward. "How can we be certain of that? Your species' history shows a disturbing tendency toward aggressive expansion." Chen saw Harrison's expression harden. The diplomatic mask was slipping, revealing the steel beneath. "Ambassador, I suggest you choose your next words very carefully. Humanity has just demonstrated that we're capable of defending ourselves against any threat. Don't make us demonstrate what we're capable of when we feel threatened by former allies." The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in galactic history, a human was making implicit threats against the established powers, and everyone knew those threats were backed by unimaginable force. Council Prime's tentacles writhed anxiously. "Admiral, the Council proposes a diplomatic solution. Full galactic citizenship for humanity, with appropriate representation based on your demonstrated military capabilities. In return, you agree to submit your weapons development to Council oversight." Harrison's laugh was cold. "Council Prime, you still don't understand. We're not asking to join your club anymore. We're informing you of the new rules." He stood and walked to the galaxy display, gesturing to the thousands of worlds that made up galactic civilization. "For centuries, you've maintained peace through a balance of power that kept everyone weak enough to be manageable. The Kethmori upset that balance, and instead of addressing the threat, you tried to sacrifice humanity to preserve your comfortable status quo." Harrison turned back to the Council representatives. "That ends now. Humanity will provide our own security, and that of any civilization that wants our protection. The old order is finished." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Representatives began shouting simultaneously. their translators struggling to keep up with the cacophony of outrage. But Chen noticed that none of them were actually threatening military action. They were all afraid of what humanity might do if pushed too far. "This is unacceptable," the Alteran representative finally managed. "No single species can dictate terms to the entire galaxy." "Watch us," Harrison replied. He activated the system-wide defense grid, and the energy readings visible to every sensor in known space spiked to levels that defied belief. "This is what deterrent actually looks like, Ambassador. Not mutual weakness, but overwhelming strength focused on protection rather than conquest." Council Prime's image flickered as his ship's sensors registered the massive energy surge. "Admiral, if you continue this course, you risk war with the entire galactic community." Harrison's smile was predatory. "Council Prime, I've just handed you the captured remnants of a Kethmori fleet that your combined forces couldn't touch for 50 years. I've demonstrated weapons that could reshape the balance of galactic power overnight. And your response is to threaten us with war?" He leaned forward, his voice deadly quiet. "Please, do try to attack Earth. I'm curious to see how your conventional fleets perform against a civilization that just turned an entire solar system into a weapons platform." The transmission ended, leaving the council representatives staring at blank screens. For the first time in galactic history, a human had hung up on the supreme governing body of known civilization. Chen watched her commander with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Sir, we just declared ourselves independent from galactic authority. Some of those civilizations have been considering military alliances specifically to contain human expansion." "Let them," Harrison replied. "They can spend the next decade trying to figure out how to build weapons that match ours, or they can accept the new reality and work with us. Either way, humanity will never again be at the mercy of alien powers." The communications board lit up with priority transmissions from across human space. The colonies that had survived the Kethmori attacks were celebrating, but they were also asking hard questions about humanity's true capabilities. "There's something else," Chen said carefully. "Our demonstration today will have been detected by every civilization in the galaxy. Some of them are going to want this technology for themselves." Harrison nodded grimly. "And they'll never get it. The zero-point extraction systems are hardwired to self-destruct if tampered with. The gravitational weapons are controlled by quantum-encrypted systems that only humans can access. Our secrets die with us." He pulled up a display showing human ship movements throughout local space. "But that doesn't mean we're going to sit in our solar system and wait for the next threat. It's time for humanity to take its rightful place in the galaxy." Chen studied the display and realized that everything had changed again. Humanity wasn't just defending Earth anymore. They were positioned to become the dominant military power in known space. The question was, what would they do with that power? 6 months after the Battle of Earth, Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of humanity's newest space station, watching the construction of the first of what would become known as the Guardian Fleet. The massive shipyard orbiting Luna worked around the clock, producing vessels that incorporated the hard-won lessons of the Kethmori War. But these weren't weapons of conquest. They were ships designed for a very different mission. "The Alteran Republic has formally requested our assistance," she reported to Admiral Harrison, who had arrived for the weekly strategic briefing. "Their outer colonies are being raided by what appear to be Kethmori remnant forces." Harrison studied the request on his datapad. 6 months ago, the Alterans had been among the most vocal critics of humanity's destabilizing military capabilities. Now they were begging for help from the same humans they had tried to contain. "Approved," he said. "Deploy the 3rd Guardian Squadron. Rules of engagement are standard. Protect civilian populations, but don't engage in offensive operations without explicit authorization from Earth." Chen nodded, but she could see the concern in his eyes. The galaxy had changed dramatically since humanity's demonstration of power, and not all the changes were positive. The old balance of power that had maintained peace for centuries was collapsing, and new threats were emerging to fill the vacuum. "Sir," she said carefully, "there's something else. Our intelligence network is reporting unusual activity in the hegemony's core systems. It appears they're attempting to rebuild their fleet using captured technology from various civilizations." Harrison's expression darkened. The captured War Master Zefkai had proven surprisingly cooperative during his interrogations, providing valuable intelligence about Kethmori military doctrine and strategic planning. But his warnings about the hegemony's true nature had been deeply disturbing. According to HFY, the fleets that had attacked human space represented only a fraction of the hegemony's total military power. The core systems contained massive shipyards and research facilities that had been building weapons for centuries. The defeated Earth had not destroyed the Kethmori. It had merely awakened them to the threat humanity represented. How long before they're ready for another assault? Harrison asked. Conservative estimates suggest 2 years minimum, Chen replied. But sir, that's assuming they stick to conventional technology. Our intelligence suggests they're experimenting with dimensional weapons and temporal manipulation. Harrison walked to the observation window and stared out at the shipyard where humanity's newest guardians were taking shape. Each ship represented years of research and development, incorporating zero-point energy systems and gravitational manipulation technology that pushed the boundaries of known physics. But would it be enough? Admiral, a new voice said from behind them. Both officers turned to see Dr. Elizabeth Monroe, the chief scientist of the Earth Defense Initiative, approaching with a datapad in her hands and excitement in her eyes. Doctor, Harrison acknowledged. I trust you have good news? Monroe smiled. Better than good. Our analysis of the captured Kethmori technology has yielded some interesting results. It turns out their weapon systems are based on principles we abandoned 30 years ago as too dangerous to pursue. She activated her datapad, projecting a holographic display that showed the internal structure of a Kethmori energy weapon. They're using controlled dimensional rifts to channel energy from parallel universes. It's incredibly powerful, but also incredibly unstable. The reason their ships can regenerate damage is because they're constantly drawing matter and energy from alternate realities. Chen studied the display with growing understanding. That's why our zero-point weapons were so effective. We weren't just destroying their ships, we were severing their connection to their power source. Exactly, Monroe confirmed. But here's the interesting part. Their technology suggests they understand dimensional theory far better than we initially believed. If they've had access to parallel universes for centuries, they might have resources we can't even comprehend. Harrison absorbed this information grimly. The implications were staggering. If the Kethmori could draw resources from infinite alternate realities, traditional concepts of logistics and industrial capacity became meaningless. What are our options? He asked. Monroe's expression grew serious. We have 2 choices. We can continue developing purely defensive technologies and hope our fortress can withstand whatever they throw at us next. Or, she paused, clearly reluctant to continue. Or, Harrison prompted, or we develop dimensional technology of our own. The theoretical foundations are sound, and we have captured Kethmori equipment to study. We could potentially tap into the same power sources they use. Chen felt a chill run down her spine. Doctor, what are the risks? Monroe's reply was sobering. Unknown. Dimensional manipulation could provide us with unlimited resources and energy. It could also tear holes in reality that might destroy not just our universe, but every parallel universe connected to it. The 3 officers stood in silence, contemplating the magnitude of the decision before them. Humanity had already crossed several technological thresholds that had fundamentally changed their relationship with the galaxy. Now they faced another choice that could elevate them to godlike power or destroy everything they were trying to protect. Sir, Chen said finally, there's another consideration. The galactic community is already terrified of our current capabilities. If we develop dimensional weapons, we could trigger a preemptive alliance against us. Harrison nodded slowly. He had been monitoring the diplomatic traffic between major civilizations, and the pattern was clear. Fear of humanity was overcoming ancient rivalries and territorial disputes. The Centaurian Republic and Vegan Confederacy, enemies for 3 centuries, were quietly discussing military cooperation for the first time in their history. Doctor, he said, begin preliminary research into dimensional theory, but nothing beyond theoretical models. We need to understand what we're dealing with before we make any irreversible decisions. A communications alert interrupted their discussion. The display showed an incoming priority transmission from the outer system monitoring stations. Admiral, the duty officer reported, we're detecting massive hyperspace distortions beyond the galactic rim. The energy signatures don't match any known Kethmori configurations. Harrison and Chen exchanged worried glances. The Kethmori hegemony controlled only a portion of the galaxy's outer rim. If something even more powerful was approaching from beyond known space, the entire strategic situation would change overnight. "Put me through to all Guardian Fleet commanders," Harrison ordered, "and get me a direct line to the Galactic Council. It's time for humanity to demonstrate what responsible galactic leadership actually looks like." Chen watched as her commander began coordinating humanity's response to the new threat. In the space of 6 months, they had gone from desperate defenders to the galaxy's primary military power. Now they faced a choice that would define not just humanity's future, but the future of every civilization in known space. Outside the observation window, the Guardian fleet continued its expansion. Massive ships designed not for conquest but for protection, crewed by humans who understood that power without responsibility led only to tyranny. War Master Zefkai had been right about one thing. Humanity was something new in the galaxy. They were a species that had learned to wield unimaginable power in service of protection rather than domination. The question now was whether that would be enough to face whatever was coming from beyond the stars, as Admiral Harrison began, broadcasting humanity's commitment to defending all civilized worlds against the approaching threat. Chen realized that Earth had indeed become humanity's sanctuary. But it had also become something more. It was the fortress from which they would defend the galaxy itself. The age of human guardianship had begun.